What up? Appreciate your patience, guys. I was on a call that ran over. Thanks for hanging out. What up, Hosey?
Bro, I have people walking in the office like, is Aaron coming live or what's going on?
No, my bad, team. My bad. I love it, bro. We got him, ready, willing, and able.
That's so funny.
Lots of stuff to talk about, dudes. Lots of stuff going on in the real estate industry, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I guess one topic that seems to be on everybody's mind at the moment is like this government shutdown.
Mm-hmm.
And if and how that could affect the real estate business. What do you see in your active real estate business?
So I did two things. Once I was like, okay, it's definitely happening,
Yeah.
One, I asked ChatGPT, I said, okay, give me the dates and the durations of all previous government shutdowns. And then I said, give me the impacts on the stock market, give me the impacts on consumer confidence, give me the impacts on mortgages, and give me the impacts on the real estate market. And it basically broke it down for me. And he's like, look, the stock market isn't really affected, which obviously I've seen that already where it's kind of remained. It's not like it's not the first time that it happens. It's basically what it gave me to understand. From a mortgage perspective, though, I do remember the last one that happened back in 2018, 2019. And I did have a mortgage professional on the podcast. And basically, he said that the only thing that he could see an impact on is that's not systemized already, like automatic by technology, is flood reports. Like if a property is in a flood zone, he's like, look, if you have a property in a flood zone, like that report comes from a certain government agency. And if that agency is not working, that could cause delays in the escrow, just depending on how far the government shutdown goes. So there may be some lender delays, but it's not like, hey, look, like I think the fact that we've experienced it before um, gives everybody like just a roadmap as to how to navigate it. At least that's what I
Yeah.
got from the lender as well,
So
too.
it's not like this like grinding to a halt, which a lot of people kind of can imagine, because the tendency for the media is to catastrophize everything or make people angry. So from a real estate perspective, yeah, there may be a little bit of lender delays, but not anything that's going to dramatically affect your business.
Yeah, I think that the people that it could cause some obviously issues for is like, let's say that you are employed by the government and unfortunately you're not receiving checks right now. If you're in escrow, that could cause some delays, or if you were planning on going into escrow, this may cause a little bit of a hiccup, and in some cases even maybe delaying going into escrow because of that. Other than that, I think everything else, the way he explained it to me, a lot of it is automatic nowadays. Which even like he's like, look, whenever somebody does an FHA loan, there's a case number, an FHA case number. He's like, that gets assigned automatically nowadays. So it's not like another human being assigning it to you.
Yeah. Yeah. So due to the automation and stuff, like the kind of friction will be less.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so, yeah. So ultimately, if you're an agent watching this, like there may be a little bit of friction, but not much. And I wouldn't overly emphasize on it. I want to spend a lot of time kind of thinking about it. Now,
I would just be asking the lenders before. So this is what I would be doing. Before you go into escrow, I would be asking the lenders, hey, look, do you foresee any delays with the government shutdown on your end?
yeah, that's
And
good.
then to the current escrows that you have, I would be proactive about it. Be like, hey, look, like obviously there's a government shutdown. Do you still see us closing escrow on time? And if not, what is an updated close of escrow? So I would just say like having that conversation before you go into escrow and for the escrows that you have right now, I think would help set more realistic expectations with all parties or consumers.
Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense. So just be a little bit proactive. So two main takeaways. One, shouldn't be a whole lot of friction, shouldn't affect you in a meaningful way. Two, be proactive with any offers that come in, speaking to the lenders and anything you got currently in escrow or, under contract.
100%.
Okay,
Yep.
that makes sense. All All right. So the next thing that we can have a conversation about in terms of this round robin and what's going on in real estate, and this might have some more kind of conversation about it, is that Zillow has had a really tough week. They are being pursued by the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, because of a deal that they made with Redfin. Kind of a backdoor deal where Zillow paid Redfin $100 million to kind of restrict access to rental data. So, I mean, I think ultimately as agents, this isn't going to affect your day-to-day business. It's more like an overarching thing, and we'll have to see how it shakes out. But there definitely seems to be an intentional, purposeful kind of effort to dismantle the mechanisms with which data is distributed and who has access to it and when they have access to it. And that leads to the next thing we'll talk about, which is Compass. So what are your thoughts on?
Yeah. give me more details on when you say that. Like, so like, let's say somebody doesn't know any details about the lawsuit. Like when you say restrict rental data, like what does that even?
Yeah. So Zillow wants to be like the sole provider of data, right? So based on my understanding with that deal, Redfin, I'm just going to look it up so I don't say anything wrong, right? Zillow paid them, Redfin, $100 million, that would allow them, online housing. So here it is, right? So the attorney generals from New York, Virginia, Arizona, Connecticut, and Washington filed a lawsuit against Redfin and Zillow on Wednesday. The suit alleges that the two companies schemed together to reduce competition in the online housing rental market. Attorney generals from 5 states sued Zillow and Redfin. The lawsuit follows a similar one filed by the Federal Trade Commission. So this is on top of the one that the Federal Trade Commission filed. And it says that, citing a February deal between the two companies in which Zillow paid Redfin $100 million to shut down its apartment rental advertising business and transfer its clients to Zillow. So it's, an aggressive tactic to allow them to be the only kind of aggregator of rental data. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, and if you backtrack, like in the course of this year, like other things that have been taking place, where like Compass sued, I think they sued Zillow and the multiple listing service in terms of like access. Remember, Zillow was like, hey, if you're going to keep data, if you're going to keep listing data out of the multiple listing service for a certain amount of time, we're not going to list any of your properties on Zillow. We're just not going to do it. So there's a fight going on about data and who has access to it and how it's distributed. Okay. And, I think there's a lot of professional animosity like towards Zillow for sure, because their business model is such where they take our data and, they sell it back to us in terms of lead gen and stuff. I also heard too, through various different, channels, that those who have Zillow Flex programs, Zillow's getting more aggressive with kind of clamping down on agents giving them back like mortgage and title with the leads, right? So like, in other words, if they give you leads, there's an expectation is that you're going to give a certain amount of those leads to their mortgage company. And if you don't, then maybe we turn the weeds off, right? The problem with that is that's like a RESPA violation. So it's one thing to, suggest or offer. It's another thing to put kind of punishment behind it with the people that are getting the leads, sort of thing. So, and I understand. I mean, they're a for-profit, publicly traded company, so their interest is in alignment with their shareholders, and they have one goal and objective, which is to make a profit. The problem is that where they make a profit is on us, right? So, and with their referral fees continuing to get higher and things of that nature, I mean, there's definitely, I believe,
some holes in the business model, basically.
Yeah, and over the next 12 months, I think there's going to be more of these types of situations or lawsuits, and there'll be more consolidation in the industry, which we're already starting to see happen. So yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it leads to the next one, the consolidation. What I think about the data is just like that's the most important piece that everybody's fighting about, basically. That's the listings, basically. Like, it's interesting, but to be honest, I hadn't really put much
I know you're too busy focused on selling properties, bro. Who cares, dude?
much thought into it. I think the one that was more more interesting was the consolidation of Compass and what the play was. And
Yeah.
I think that you thought about it on a much deeper level than what I thought about it. I just thought about it like, hey, look, like they are now just a lot bigger. I didn't think about like all the secondary, third, fourth level consequences, basically,
Yeah.
or what the actual play is.
Yeah.
So I
So
think
what
if
was
you
your
could
what
talk
was
on
your
that.
initial thought? Like, what was your initial thought?
I think it was just like, oh, like good for them. They bought another thing. Like
I
the
love it.
business model for a lot of the other brokerages isn't really working. So I think the only way to try to make it work would be to consolidate and then basically make money off the ancillary services. And my thought was that now, with them being larger, I think they're able to just have more negotiation power, basically. But to be
Yeah.
honest, like I the way I thought about it, I'm just like, even though they consolidated, I still believe it's the wrong business model. That was my kind of thought around
Yeah,
it.
like the play. So there's a couple things to kind of like really think about, right? So the first is there's an industry kind of ramification. There's the kind of first level thought before you get to second and third level consequences is like, okay, how does this affect like their business? What does this say about their business? What does it say about anywhere's business? Right. And then third and fourth would be like, okay, and what does this say about like the industry and what's happening in the industry in the moment? Right.
Mhm.
So from a first level perspective, in terms of like Compass, so I was on a call, their conference call, which is so interesting because if you want to really know the way companies really feel and what their actual plans are, be on conference calls where they're reporting earnings because they're talking to investors. And oftentimes that's a much different, diametrically opposed different conversation than when they're to the general public. Okay. So on that call, what I thought was really interesting is what I heard the CEO of Compass say was like, hey, this strategy of like off market listings, right? Which is essentially what they are, and kind of private exclusive is so important to our ability to become profitable that we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about it. So what I find it very interesting about that is from my perspective, based on hearing that and my own kind of understanding, is that that is a business strategy that's masquerading around as choice. Yeah. So be like, oh, like sellers want choice, blah, blah, blah. No, it's a business strategy that's masquerading as choice. The choice part is the marketing piece. Underneath that, it's a business strategy, really to get into the lead game and to get into the data game to try to create more revenue, right? Second takeaway when I was on that call is their core business is really the traditional brokerage business, which is, you try to make money as best you can in the brokerage business, which is becoming increasingly more challenging. And you make money in ancillary services, right? So if you think about this from like just from their perspective, if that's like the core and that this is a strategy, how does that play into this move, right? Knowing that if that's context. Well, one, if you become the largest brokerage firm in the country, right? Like 300 plus thousand agents, more than like double the second largest. That's a play of like economies of scale. So with more agents, the idea would be is there be more transactions. And then the idea would be is there would be more ancillaries, right? From like a fundamental kind of
Yeah.
rudimentary pedestrian kind of thinking. The next play though is really about a data play, right? Because if you're in the sandbox and you're fighting with the Association of Realtors, you're fighting with MLS systems and suing them, by getting enormous, now you have more weight to swing around, right? If you have 300 something thousand agents and there's like 1,000,000 plus agents in the United States, 1,000,001, 1,000,002, like you're like a third of all the agents, right? So that's interesting. The other thing that's very interesting about it is it was an all stock purchase. Now, what I find interesting about that is that as a company, they've actually never like been profitable.
Mm-hmm.
So you're taking something that's like, you haven't been profitable, and you're using that to buy a company that has $3 billion worth of debt.
Mm-hmm.
So like from a business perspective, it's like, I don't see how that makes sense. Now, I understand how like Amazon could lose money for 20 years. It's different economies of scale, right? Like this business is, again, like what I see is like it's a business strategy masquerading around as like choice, and they are a traditional brokerage firm masquerading as a tech company.
Do you think that they would ever consider taking the 300,000 agents on the cloud and kind of getting rid of the physical offices?
It's interesting. They would have to, it would be a huge divestiture if you think about it.
Yeah.
Gigantic. I mean, I was in Boston, big, beautiful office, bro. Enormous. And it was gorgeous, Jose, like gorgeous. They spent $1 million probably. You know how many people were in there? One. It was huge. It was probably like, I don't know, 10,000 square feet, bottom floor, downtown Boston. There's nobody in there. So it would be a huge divestiture. Now, so that's what it says about like their business. Now, what does it say about Anywhere's business? Because remember, we have to put this into context. Like Anywhere owns a lot of these traditional brands.
Yeah.
What Gene Frederick would call the Macy's, the JCPenney's, and the Dillards of real estate, which are the Century 21s, the Remaxes, the Caldwell, not Remax, Century 21, Caldwell Banker,
Better Homes,
ERA, right?
Sotheby's,
Century 21.
Yep.
So what does that say about their business? Well, they're having a very difficult time making money, right?
Yeah.
As far as like their model is concerned in the traditional brokerage model, because the cost has gone up dramatically, the margins have shrunk dramatically, right? And what I think is very interesting is like, when you speak to agents, I think one of the propaganda is really powerful because it works.
Mm-hmm.
And it's dangerous because it works. So one of the things me and you hear from agents all the time is they'll be like, oh, like my brand. Well, what I find so fascinating is something like this demonstrates that like the brand doesn't really matter.
No, that's
right?
true.
So what it says about their business is like that it's shrinking and they're trying to get out. The other thing to keep in mind is that Gary Keller sold his interest of more likely not the majority. That's speculative. I don't know how much he sold because it wasn't a public knowledge, but I know private equity is not interested unless they get 50%. They want to be in control. So he sold out to private equity this year, and you have this giant conglomerate of all these brands selling out. What pattern are we noticing? Are they doing that because there's a tremendous amount of money in what they're doing?
No, they're cashing out.
Nah, bro. They're like, I see what's coming, bro. I'm getting out of this thing. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, like when you analyze that, I think what we're watching happening is if you look at the evolution of models in the real estate space, the evolution, like it used to be mom and pops, and that was it. And then these franchises came out, and then they exploded, right? The franchise thing. And then that was for like a while. There was like a heyday, but the problem was it went from 50-50 splits, and that shrunk because then they went to like capping mechanisms that came out, and it started to shift, right? And then you have the KWs of the world, and they explode because they have a capping mechanism, and they offer like a little bit of profit share, which is much different than revenue sharing. And then you have the cloud-based model that comes out, which solves for the problem of staff and space. So I believe what you're witnessing happening with all of these changes, there's two things. One is there's structural changes to the way we transact. That'll be who has access to data, when they have access to it, MLS systems, the whole thing with Compass, ClearQuap, like that whole thing. That's the kind of structural mechanisms with which we transact and do business, right? And then there's industry kind of patterns and what's taking place in the brokerage business. And what I believe what we're seeing is a massive consolidation. I think we'll see more of it. I think other big brands will go in the same direction in terms of consolidating. And I think we might look at the landscape in like 24 months and it'll look entirely different from a brokerage perspective. Yeah. And really that's a response to the traditional model just no longer being tenable as far as like being able to make money.
Yeah. What I was going to ask you is, in order to attend the shareholder meeting, do you have to own stock?
No,
No, you
anybody,
just basically,
no, because those are recorded. You could just
okay,
like listen. Yeah.
nice,
Mhm. And
amazing.
I'm telling you, you want to get like real insight.
Well, I think the interesting thing is like the private shareholder meetings will say what's really happening, and then to the consumers are like, oh, like they're fighting, like, hey, pro-choice, this is what's better
Yeah.
for the industry.
Yeah.
But in the end of the day, it's a business model,
Yeah.
basically.
And then on the call, what they'll say is like, hey, this is so important strategically to us making money. We're going to spend the rest of the time talking about it.
Yeah. I was just looking at the stock, like, has the stock gone up or down as a result of it? Basically, last 5 days for Compass, um, negative half a point. Last month, negative 12%, basically. Today, it's up 5%. But I mean, over the last 6 months, I mean, it's negative 5.93.
Yeah. And
Um,
Anywhere got a once it was announced that they were going to purchase, right? But again, I just don't. I, we've sat with brokers that have 1,000 agents
yeah.
in traditional models, and their profit margins are negligible. They're like 5%.
Well, I think the sad part is that agents don't realize the business model of brokerages. Like, I know agents that are like, "Hey, look, I'm just gonna go and open up my own brokerage."
Yeah, bro.
And I'm just like, "Why would you do that?" And I'm like, What if I told you that that brokerages run at a less than a 10% profit margin?" And a lot of them were like, "Well, why?" Like they don't believe it. And then I'm like, what if I told you that brokerages don't actually make money off the brokerage? They actually make money off the ancillary services. And a lot of them were like, and then I'll hear things like, well, I couldn't live with myself unless I tried this. My
I
heart's
know.
telling
You know
my
what they're
heart,
really saying to you? My ego is so big that I refuse to listen to anything that you're saying. That's what
yeah,
they're really saying.
my heart's telling me that I gotta give this a
Yeah,
shot,
good for you. Okay. Way to go. That's not your heart, team. That is pride and ego. That's what's doing it. So, but the other interesting thing too, which I find is fascinating, and we had a brief conversation about this in terms of like uh, teams are smaller versions of brokerages,
Yeah. And they're
and
facing similar challenges now.
they're 100% the exact. I know somebody, okay, who is like, you know, hot to trot, the big deal. They do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of units, and they are in production. They are selling real estate again. So teams, 10, 30, 40 agents, they're mini brokerages, and they have the same problem. So
Challenges.
what I find fascinating is nobody's really like aggressively and forcefully saying to people, hey, you need to rethink this. We need to rethink all models. Well, kind of Glenn is a category creator, right, with EXP, because he did that and ushered in the cloud-based, which makes all the sense in the world because it eliminates the two biggest expenses, which are staff and space. Because remember, we were on a call with that guy, 1,000 agents, 5% profit margins. He's like, yo, I think in the next 5 years, there'll be no profit. And I looked right at
Yeah.
him. I'm like, yeah, in your model, there won't. But I think the same thing needs to be done for teams. There needs to be a rethink on how it functions, because right now it functions like a old school brokerage where
Yeah.
the agents make very little of the commission, maybe 30% when it all shakes out. And after they pay their fees and after they pay Zillow Flex referrals and all this other stuff, and the team leader has to do an insane amount of units to make the money that they want. I told you, I talked to a guy who does 800 units, makes $1 million on 800 units. You're like, what? That's crazy, bro. You'll do 150 units and net $1 million. Like, what are we doing?
Is he still in production or no?
No, but still, like,
No,
think
yeah.
about all, like, that's insane. Think about all that friction. Think about all the people. Think about all the kind of liability. It's just wild, all the expenses to be able to do that. So there needs to be a rethink for both. Now, on the brokerage side, it's already been rethought,
Yeah.
right? It's cloud-based. That's the way. But it's the same for the team, because I think we've been the kind of collective consciousness for the last 20 years in our industry is here's the progression. You're an agent. And then, you're like, hey, this is really hard and I want to get some leverage. And then you create a team. And then I open a brokerage if I want to do that. Like that's the progression, but we're constrained by our understanding of leverage. So what I think is super fascinating is when you look at what's happening and these are big numbers, guys, $1.6 billion, big numbers. Okay. When we see what's happening at scale, they're showing you that it's not working. Yeah. When you have somebody sell out, at least, again, speculative. I don't know how much he sold, but I know private equity is usually not interested in less than 50%, at least 50% to private equity. And you have one of the largest conglomerates of brands selling out. They're showing you, they're telling you this is not working. But yet we're kind of following the same path by going down the path of like, oh, let me create a team. And like, let me do it, right?
What do you think the play with Keller is now that private equity?
Well, yeah. So here's the interesting thing. So private equity, when you really think about it, two things. One, they're not interested for long-term ownership. They want to own maybe 5 years tops, and they want to exit. They either want to take it public or they want to sell it. They're not interested in keeping forever. Now you have to think about from their perspective. This is a deeper level conversation, but it'll make sense if you hang with me. So franchises are actually not in the brokerage business. They don't make money selling real estate. Franchises are in the business of selling franchises. And then they monetize the relationships in the form of like, let's say like you bought like a Burger King franchise. They're not in the business of selling burgers, okay? They're in the business of selling Jose a burger franchise, a Burger King franchise, but then they monetize the relationship with Jose. They make money off Jose by selling him ingredients, cup straws, right? You have to use all their stuff, and they get a royalty fee, which is like, let's say 6% of sales, which is top line revenue. It's revenue sharing. Okay. So franchise brands have more in common with, let's say, like real estate brands have more in common with, let's say, like Yum Brands. Yum Brands owns like Pizza Hut. They own Taco Bell, right? Mm-hmm. So whereas EXP, we're a brokerage firm, right? They're actually not brokerage firms. They're in the business of selling franchises, right? And they monetize the relationships with the franchisees in the form of title, escrow, mortgage, whatever, right? Okay. And maybe they get a royalty fee, top line revenue. Okay. So when this kind of happens, you have to think about it. If the goal is to take it IPO or the goal is to sell it, you want to make it more valuable. How do you make it more valuable? You increase revenue. But how are you going to increase revenue when you don't actually make money selling real estate? It's an interesting question, because then it starts to lead you down this path. How do they actually make money? Well, the first is a tech fee. Yeah. The company that bought them out, or the private equity firm, they own two separate software companies. Okay. I think Lone Wolf and another one. So they're going to bundle that into the tech fee, and they're going to start raising the tech fee as much as possible until people squeal. Right. Because that's how they actually make money. Because think about it. If you could raise the tech fee $50 on 170,000 people, it's a lot of money. Second way is coaching. Right. I think it's a meaningful percentage of their kind of bottom line. So I think they'll push that, and they'll, raise the prices, all that. But then the third is, and this is the important one, what would drop the VAT, like a lot of money to the bottom line, like 40%. It's that royalty fee. That's how. So I think what they're going to do systematically over time is they're either going to buy back, let's say like the region, or they're just going to take it by force. Because that'll drop a whole bunch of money at bottom line, make it more comfortable, so make it more profitable, so they can exit.
Yeah,
and that's just business, bro. It's not like, it's nothing else other than that. So that's how I see that kind of playing out over time.
Yeah, wild. What I think about when I think about the business models is I go back to always that book, that Blue Ocean Strategy, and that Blue Ocean Strategy talks about how you can take an existing business model, change a couple of pieces to the business model, and make it a better business model.
Yeah.
And then what I think about is like the Blockbusters. I think about like, hey, Blockbuster had a business model. Netflix took that same business model, took it on the cloud, and all of a sudden made it a much, much better.
You know what I find super interesting? That guy who like Reed Hastings, the founder of Netflix, tried to sell Netflix, the blockbuster, twice. He tracked him down while he was skiing. He offered him Netflix for $50 million. He turned it down. That guy's like now doing a circuit as like a leadership expert. I'm like, bro, he made like, it was like the worst decision, like the biggest fumble in like history. Like, how's that possible? That he's like going around, they're like, hey, asking him what he thinks about stuff. I mean, I guess we all make mistakes, but I don't know. That's like a monstrous blunder where you're just full of hubris because they were the giant, right? In the room. Now, I think here's what's interesting. All the agents that are watching this or watch it after, we're live, this is like a really high level, 30,000 foot view of like the industry. I don't want you to get like overly lost in the minutia. I do think it's important for you to have a general understanding of what's happening. My job, right, is to do that, sit on top of the hill, pay attention to what's happening, and then disseminate information to agents to say, hey, this is how it may affect you, or here's how you may want to think about it, or here's how you could position yourself to get your unfair share, sort of thing, and try to figure out patterns and what's happening. At its core, though, I think what Jose led with is truth, which I'm like, hey, what'd you think about this? He's like, I don't know. And I'm like, hey, what'd you think about this? He's like, I don't know. Like, I thought this, like, I'm just trying to sell like 150 homes this year. So at its core, the business is still the same. We prospect, we follow up, we're going to appointments and negotiate deals. We have to be in the presence of prospects on a regular basis. We have to increase our value. We need to focus on lead sources that have high densities, motivated, qualified sellers, like probates, like cash offer leads. We need to increase our product knowledge. We need to get better at like all of that. You will be fine. Okay.
Yeah.
If you remember last year, do you remember when they changed the rules with commissions? Everybody thought like, oh man, the world's falling. And me and you did like all these talks on it and everything. And like, it didn't change anything. So I think it is, as somebody who is very much so curious and fascinated by business and by our business, specifically real estate, I think it's important to have some level of attention, some level of, hey, what's going on, to see if structurally how we do business might change, because then maybe conversations change, maybe how we present changes. But I need everybody to know, like, again, the fundamentals are going to stay the same, and leaders don't panic, they pivot. Okay. We can easily pivot into whatever we see come down the pipe, and me and Jose will continue to pay attention and, notice patterns. And if we see anything like, hey, we need to start paying attention to this and looking at this, then I think it, of course, we'll share it with you immediately. Now, I do think that all of this disruption is going to be a massive opportunity for like attraction, enormous, because everybody's looking for certainty. Everybody's looking for results. And as an industry, like I think we've gotten away with for a long time, like they've just outsourced everything. And we've gotten away with like mediocre, it's fueled by significance. That's the kind of currency. We put a ton of people on panels and they usually don't add a lot of value. It's not like really like, tactical and practical brass tacks. And people are looking for that, right? In a major way, not only because of the disruption, but because of what's happening in just like in general, where we go from 6.5 million to 3.9 million transactions. And that persists for like 3 years in a row. People need tactics, bro.
Yeah. And I think that like, the tactics revolve around, one, how to generate leads or how to get leads of sellers, not buyers.
Yep.
2, how to convert those leads, meaning like what to say, how to say it. And then 3, how to service the leads, meaning like once you actually get a contract signed, how do you get it to the finish line? Meaning like price reductions, weekly updates, negotiating an offer on it, negotiating requests for repairs, appraisals, whatever it may be. But that's really what it comes down to. It comes down to like, okay, how do I generate more leads? It's funny. One of our agents generated a lead, and it was a reverse mortgage. And the person told them, look, you don't need to talk to me. You need to talk to the reverse mortgage company.
Yeah.
And when he came to me with that, I'm like, well, look, the reason he's telling you that is probably there's more money owed than what the property is worth. So what the agent said, it's too complicated for me. He said, you take over. So I basically gave me the lead. I basically realized I wasn't talking to the decision maker. So I basically said, who's the decision maker, forewarned the number, and then basically talked to the decision maker, which was the trustee, asked her if she would be open to short selling it versus doing a deed in lieu of foreclosure, meaning giving it back to the bank. She said yes. yesterday we signed up the listing at a great price, and now we're just going to service it and get it to the finish line. But it was like, okay, he made that lead cold calling. So then the conversion part, that's where most people have challenges in. And then it was the servicing part. But
That's right.
generating the lead is pretty easy. It's more of like, okay, how do I learn these different things? And the agent's newer, so he had no idea what a short sale was because he wasn't in the market in 2008, 9, 10, 11, or 12, where those were a lot more common, you know? So
Yeah, and like that's a perfect example of what we're talking about. So like, all these big changes and kind of like structural and like, FTC or whatever, like
this is the foundation. This is
this is
just
the
generate.
foundation. And what you're saying is like, which I think is counterintuitive for most people. Most people think that their problem is like leads and like, oh, where do I find them? It's like, nah, dude,
No,
that's
that's
actually
the
not the issue.
easiest part.
The issue is conversion. And that has to do with specifically like being very competent and scripted and professional in terms of knowing what to say and how to say it, how to ask questions, how to pre-qualify at a high level. And then when you tack on this additional information, because what I find fascinating, dude, like most agents, even really productive ones, bro, that list a lot of properties, they just stop learning about real estate. They stop. They just know how to list property. I mean, I did that. I just list property in high volume. You know what I mean? Like just pound them out. And it's just listing. Where the marketplace is demanding not only that we add more value, but also that you be able to convert leads better. And the way that you can do that is with product knowledge. So understanding, like you said, like a short sale situation and how to navigate that, understanding novations, understanding wholesale, understanding
How
performance.
investors make offer,
How investors make offers, cash offer leads. Like these all help you to convert on leads that are sitting right in front of you, or sub two deals where like 3 agents will meet with them and be like, I can't help you. And then you'll go in and be like, oh yeah, that's what this is. Like, so if there was a way that, you could get a little bit of money, the other person gets like the interest rate that they want, and we can get you to your next destination versus you having to like give this back to the bank. Is that something you'd be open to? Well, yeah, that'd be fantastic. And then you do the deal and you make money and the buyer gets the rate that they want and everybody's happy.
I'm making $1,000 a month on a subject to deal where I finance my commission into the
Let's
deal.
go, bro.
So every month I receive a
You see,
little.
look at that level of like creativeness. You know what I'm saying? You financed your commission. Not only were you able to put the sub two deal together, but then you're like, you know what? He's like, yeah, dude, I can't pay you all at once. Like, no problem. We'll just put it on a payment plan.
1,000. It was funny because I was checking the books, the profit and loss,
Yeah.
and I saw like at the bottom, I said it because I don't get to see any of the paychecks. Like I have nothing to do with the finance department,
Yeah.
but I looked at it and it said $1,000, and it said the address for the property. I was like, oh my god, that's amazing!
Yeah.
It's coming in.
That's dope.
So yeah,
So yeah, I think it's again, it's okay to stay informed. Don't obsess about it. We'll be studying it. We'll be paying attention to it. We'll be monitoring it to see if there's any patterns that we can take advantage of, any opportunities that become available as a result. And in the meantime, in between time though, just stay dialed in, man. Stay focused.
and this is the way I think about product knowledge. It was interesting because when I was learning sales, obviously, but then I was like, you have to learn product knowledge. Um, I think about it like, let's say you go into a dealership, Novello, and you tell them, hey, I'm looking for a car that has around 400 horsepower. I'm looking for a car that has like a navigation. I'm looking for a car that is a convertible. And they come to you with all these wants and needs. And if you have no product knowledge, you can't say, oh, that's the Camaro, or hey, that's the Corvette, or hey, look, that's the Mustang. Not only that, but product knowledge goes out further. Product knowledge goes out like when a consumer comes to you, they may come to you where, look, I'm actually considering like a Mustang, but I'm also considering a Camaro. That comes out to like, okay, just knowledge about like cars in general. So like a lot of times when consumers come to us, they're considering different options. They're not only considering the listing route. They may be considering like open door. They may be considering like a cash offer from an investor. They may be considering like doing an ovation or just different things. So that's where understanding what options consumers have will help you. Like, so if somebody came to me and I was selling cars, I'm like, hey, look, I'm actually considering the Mustang over the Camaro. First thing I would say is I would say, because I own a Camaro, I would say, do they make the Mustangs for men?
That's too funny, bro. Oh, that's good.
I'm
That's
just
good.
kidding. No,
You're
but
not, but that's cool.
I would say something along the lines like I would know what features and benefits the Mustang has and how it compares to the Camaro, basically. Like horsepower, like reputation, durability, performance, things
Yeah,
that people would want to know, and that's the same thing. Like right now in our market, there's these companies, bro, and it's actually a pretty decent business model. There's these companies that are doing options with homeowners, offering up a sum
I know.
for an opportunity to buy a
Do you
portion of their equity. They're
do you know there
making
was
like
a company
20%
that did that though? Oh, wait. So okay, so they're offering a portion of their equity.
equity, and they're doing
Oh,
it in California.
interesting.
But so what I did, because it's come up on conversations, bro, maybe like 10 to 20 different times
Really? So it's enough.
in conversations with leads. So every time I'm talking to somebody, like, oh, I'm considering one of these equity companies. And the first time it happened, the person actually did it. So I'm like, okay, that was a deal that would normally go out to either the cash buyer, or go out to a lender, go out to a realtor, or go out to something else. And then it happened like second or three times. So after that, I'm like, okay. So now when people are considering that, I'm like, hey, look, let me help you evaluate this option, and let me give you some input. Here's what I would need from you. So I would need samples of their contracts. I would need samples of any marketing material that they're giving you. And I had that information. I started to analyze it. But all I'm doing is I'm realizing a product that's in the marketplace, and I'm learning about it just to see the pros and cons. And then it's going to be a fit for certain people, but then for other people, it's not going to be a certain fit at all. So what's happening is that I have a client who has a call with them on Wednesday, like a sales call. And I'm going to sit in on that call and just kind of listen in and make notes and ask questions. But what that's going to do, it's the same thing that happened when Open Door came out and agents were getting beat out by Open Door. I
Yeah.
just basically learned about Open Door, learned how they work, and then I was able to realize, like, okay, like in what situations is Open Door the best option? It's the same thing with these equity companies, but it's just this this ability to be able to look at real estate, be like, okay, what products are out there? What can I learn about these products? And then how can I guide people to those
Yeah.
products when they
So
need it?
instead of most people's mindset is like, let me just poo-poo it and knock it down and be like stupid and dumb. When I know you've done deals with Open Door and
I
got
have,
commissions, where
yeah.
like they'll pay 1% if you bring them like if you get their cash offer kind of
And
in the
it's
door.
probably the same thing with these companies. They're probably
Probably.
going to come up with at some point, they're going to realize, like, oh, like agents are the ones that talk to all the people. Let me come up with a business model where I can compensate agents or have
What's the
agents benefit.
what's their have you studied it? So like in other words, like
Very briefly.
so they'll give you like what, like $10,000 in exchange for 5% of your equity?
So the way that it works is they'll give you like a lump sum, usually like somewhere between 50 to maybe $200,000. And then I believe that they structure it as a option, but what they do is they appraise your property, and then they basically say the baseline is like 200,000 below that. So their option, so basically the
They're
way I
buying an option to buy the property.
to
They're
buy the property, and you reserve the option back to rebuy the property in the future. But the way I looked at it is in the first 2 years they make okay money, but after the second year they're earning 20% on their money basically.
yeah.
And then after 4 to 5 years, they're doubling their money. So whatever they invest, like after $100,000, in 4 or 5 years, it turns into $200,000. I don't understand it fully, and I haven't like looked at the
And is there a
documents
time
fully.
frame attached to their option?
10-year option,
But
basically.
at any
10-year
time in 10
option,
years, they can buy it.
10-year option with the option to no, they can't buy it anytime. You have to do something within 10 years,
Oh, so within
basically.
10 years, you have to
You
either
have to
refinance or you have
basically
to sell it.
refinance them out, cash them out, or sell the property,
But
basically.
in exchange for the money that they're giving, they get a certain percentage of they get
Yeah.
some sort of return.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, and I don't think people understand that fully. So like I know that there was a company out there that what
They
they were
they
doing.
do they understand it. The sad part is that because they need the money
Oh, they do
and
it anyway.
it doesn't go on their credit, and they don't have to make monthly payments on the money. So, like, let's say you get a loan, a hard money loan, you gotta pay 10%. So these are people that don't want to pay that 10% monthly on a hard money loan, and will take the money. The other thing is that there's usury laws in California. I don't know if in the rest of the country, where you can't charge more than a certain percentage for owner occupied people, and you can't give hard money loans to owner occupied people. But this is almost like a workaround, basically, around the loans, where they're able to earn 20% on their money on owner occupied people by structuring it differently. I sent it to an attorney and I said, "Hey, look, there's this company doing, I want to do something like this because they're earning 20%." The attorney's like, "I have no idea how they're doing it." So now I'm collecting all the documents to figure out how they're
Yeah, I
doing it.
love that. Collect all the documents, sit on the call, and then we'll talk about it. But I know that there was a company that they were doing something similar, but it was an
To
option
buy
on.
commissions.
Yeah, well, like they were going around Florida. They would give somebody like $500 cash, but then they put themselves on the lien. They leaned, put a lien against the property. So whenever you sold the property, you had to pay them 6% or whatever it
Yeah.
was, 6%. Now they got sued for like hundreds. Like it was a big thing, and they lost. So that kind of disappeared. I actually remember being on a call with me, you, and Angel, and like we talked about it because I was seeing it in the marketplace. I bumped into somebody who was like, I went to go put the property on the market, and I got an email. They're like, "Nah, dude, we have this thing. Like, we gave him $500." I was like, "What? That sounds crazy to me." So it sounds like, to your point, there's all this equity trapped. People have had such a hard time, financially. We've had the highest credit card debt, highest student loan debt. We've had lots of inflation, highest levels of educational debt. And instead of going to the bank and like doing a HELOC or whatever, they don't have to do anything. They'll get the money because they
Well,
really need it. But then on the back end, they have to do something within 10 years. And what's happening over time, the longer that they wait to do it, the more percentage that they're paying for the money. Correct?
Well, a lot of times what this product is good for, people that I'm noticing, because I always notice patterns of who like the avatar is.
Yeah.
The person is exploring like private loans or like a home equity line of credit, but then you have monthly payments and it goes on your credit report if you do that option. They're considering the option of cashing out. They're considering the option of listing it. The benefit of this option is that they get to stay in their home. So a lot of times it's basically a way for somebody to stay in their home with no additional monthly payments. And they're either using that money to consolidate debt
Or just pay
or
bills.
pay bills, basically,
Yeah. So Chris says here,
or
which is
fix up the
interesting,
property.
he was like, "Yo, this reminds me of a We Finance All credit dealership, car dealership, because the whole thing is you get a lump sum upfront and no monthly payments."
Yeah, it's Home Tap is one of them. There's another company called Point. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm basically collecting all the documents and all the contracts for these
It's awesome.
companies. I'm figuring out how they work, and then now that just becomes another tool in our tool belt, basically. But that's
Yeah,
how my
and or
brain
it's
thinks,
either a tool in the tool belt that you can guide, or you can say to people, "Hey, I wouldn't do that, and here's why."
Well, and here's the interesting thing. I actually have 2 clients right now that are selling their property because they're like, "Look, dude, I'm already like at year 5 and all
Oh,
my equity's
oh, they
being
did it already.
washed." Yeah, they did it like way before I met them, like 5 years ago, 4 years ago. I'm noticing it more frequently now where it's becoming more popular, but that's even but I have to understand, in order for me to sell against something, if something's really not beneficial,
Yeah, I have to understand what it
I
is.
have to understand it, how it works, to be able to guide
But it
people in the
sounds
right
like, to your
direction.
point, like they give you the money. It's tied to your equity. They do an appraisal to make sure that you have equity. Then they give you the money based on a really big margin of safety, like $200,000 below fair market value. They'll give you whatever based on that. The beginning, like that first year, you don't feel anything. So it feels like, oh, this is cool. Like I just got all the money, like whatever, we're good. But then as time progresses, you're paying 20% on the money that they gave you up until 10 years.
Well, and yeah, exactly. So in the first, because I ran it by Chat GPT and I said, hey, look, like do a chart for me under different scenarios because it's kind of complex, bro.
It
Like,
is. Well, this sounds like an advanced, like kind of Wall Street, like complex tactic. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Structure.
yeah. And what I saw was that in the first 2 years, it's okay. It's not like absorbent by any amount. But what I'm noticing is a lot of people's plan is like, oh, I'll just pay it off in 2 years. But then what happens, bro? Life gets in the way, and then they realize like, oh, okay, I can't refinance. So because they can't refinance, or it makes it more complex to refinance, it makes it so that they're in year 5, 6, 7. So eventually they have to sell the property. Basically, they're almost better off cashing out and then starting somewhere fresh, maybe like
100%. But what
downsizing.
it's playing against is the
They
human
don't. They want to stay in their home
desire to not move.
to not move. Yeah, 100%.
So they're in a situation like their prime kind of person for that is they're in a situation where financially the writing's on the wall, that it's no
Denial.
longer financially feasible. Like the probability of them being able to maintain their lifestyle or living situation financially is low. They are in denial about that. This seems like a solution to that, but it actually speeds up the process of them leaving and they just leave with less.
Yeah.
That's bummy,
There's a
bro.
lot of equity. Yeah.
They lose a ton of
But
equity.
the sad part is people are still I'm watching people like right before my eyes being like, look, like I'm gonna do it. And I'm just like, they're just like, I'll just refinance in 2 years, or I'll basically cash out in 2 years. And I'm just like, man, like,
That's operating under the assumption that rates will be down, like all that. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like there's
there's
just all
so
these
many
unknown
uncertainties.
variables.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, you know what's great, bro, is that the beautiful people of Oxnard have you to do all that homework. And as we share this with people, if you're in his marketplace, do likewise so you can equip your clients. And this is a perfect example of what we're talking about, guys. Look, there's no shortage of opportunities. You're one relationship away from finding them. You just have to keep equipping yourself with all the changes that are happening. I know it can seem like a lot. I wouldn't spend too much time thinking about it. We just talked about it today because it was kind of top of mind, and perhaps a little bit of information is good. My job is to monitor, pay attention, look for kind of patterns, look for opportunities, for any of the agents that are out there that, are going to hear this message or in our ecosystem in some form or fashion. But in the meantime, in between time, recognize that most things won't affect your business in a meaningful way. And the thing that will affect your business in the most meaningful way is to continue to make yourself more valuable, continue to get in proximity to people that can bring out the best in you, that can challenge you, that can hold you accountable, get into a community of like-minded, hard-charging individuals that can, show you where the opportunities are and equip you with the skills that you need to be able to take advantage of them. And if you do that, you will do more deals independent of market conditions. So we appreciate you guys. Let's go, let's grow, and we'll talk soon. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Later.